Alex, I was looking at this slab of cherry this morning, just staring at the face of it, and it hit me. We spend all this money on the fanciest carbide tipped blades and high speed steel, but the most powerful tool in this entire building isn't plugged into a wall. It's what happened inside that tree 20 years ago.
That's deep, Tiger. Are we doing tree philosophy today? Because I thought we were talking about why my last tabletop looks like it was attacked by a caffeinated beaver.
Well, that beaver attack is exactly what I'm talking about. You're fighting the grain, and the grain is a stubborn opponent. It's like trying to pet a cat from the tail to the head. You can do it, but you're going to get scratched. Most folks see a board as a flat surface, but it's actually a tightly packed bundle of drinking straws. If you jam a blade into the wrong end of those straws, they don't cut. They splinter and shatter.
Right, tear out. The bane of my existence. I get the straws analogy, but when I'm looking at a piece of rough-cut oak, it just looks like wood. How am I supposed to know which way the straws are pointing before I ruin a $60 board?
That's the secret sauce. You got to look at the side of the board, the edge grain. Imagine the fibers are like shingles on a roof. If you run your hand up the roof, you're catching every edge. If you slide it down, it's smooth. On the side of your board, you'll see these little V-shapes or slanted lines. You want to pet the fur down the slope.
Okay, but what about those boards where the grain looks like a topographical map of the Himalayas? The figured stuff that you love so much. I tried to plane some curly maple last week, and it was like trying to shave a hedgehog.
Oh, curly maple is a special kind of torture. In figured wood, the fibers are literally undulating. They're diving down into the board and popping back up every half inch. There's no right direction because half the wood is always pointing the wrong way. In those cases, I usually put the hand plane away and switch to a cabinet scraper, or I'll sharpen my iron until it can split a hair and close up that mouth on the plane until there's barely a whisper of a gap.
So, if it's that much of a headache, why do we bother? Why not just use MDF and paint it?
Don't even joke like that. The grain is where the soul is, but it's also where the strength lives. I've been reading some of Peter Galbert's work lately. He's a chair maker who's obsessed with riving wood. Instead of sawing a board, he splits it with a wedge.
Like splitting firewood? That seems a bit primitive for a master craftsman.
It's the most sophisticated thing you can do, actually. When you saw a board, the blade just travels in a straight line, regardless of how the tree grew. You end up with runout where the fibers just end abruptly at the edge of the board. That's a weak point. But when you split it, when you rive it, the cleavage follows the internal fibers perfectly. You get a part that can bend like a gymnast and won't snap under pressure because every single fiber runs from tip to tail.
I remember you telling me about a chair leg you were working on a few years back. Something about it ending up in the wood stove.
Oh, more than one. I was trying to turn these very slim, elegant legs for a Windsor chair out of kiln-dried sawn oak. Every time I got the taper down to where I wanted it, the grain runout would catch and the whole leg would just explode. Shrapnel everywhere. I was stubborn. I thought I could just technique my way through a structural flaw in the wood itself. I spent 3 days making firewood the hard way before I realized I was fighting chemistry and physics. Now, if I need something thin and strong, I find a board with straight grain that runs parallel to the edge, or I grab the froe and split a log myself.
So, for the rest of us who aren't out in the woods splitting logs, how does this affect our furniture builds? If I'm making a coffee table, does grain direction really matter beyond the beaver attack sanding issues?
It's the difference between a table that stays flat and one that turns into a potato chip by next August. Wood is basically a sponge that never stops breathing. It expands and contracts across the grain, but almost never along the length. If you glue a piece of trim across the end grain of a wide tabletop, what we call a breadboard end, and you don't allow for movement, that wood is going to find a way to move. It'll crack itself apart or bow your table. It's like trying to stop a slow-motion freight train.
That brings up a good point. End grain. Why does it drink up finish like a parched hiker? I put one coat of oil on a cutting board, and the ends just disappeared into a dark abyss while the face looked barely damp.
Think back to those drinking straws. The end grain is the open mouth of the straw. It'll suck up finish until there's nothing left. If you're finishing a project, you usually have to hit those ends with 3 or 4 times as much product, or seal them first with a bit of shellac so they don't go 5 shades darker than the rest of the piece.
You mentioned something earlier that caught my ear, using grain to harmonize a design. That sounds a bit artist fartsy for a guy who keeps a jar of sawdust for structural repairs.
Guilty as charged. But listen, the grain tells a story. If you have a cabinet with two doors and the grain pattern flows from one door across the gap to the next, what we call slip matching or book matching, it creates this visual rhythm. If the grain is chaotic and jumping all over the place, your eyes don't know where to rest. It makes the piece feel nervous. I like to use the cathedrals, those big arching patterns you see in plain sawn boards, to point upward to give a piece a sense of height.
Okay, I can see that. It's like tailoring a suit. You want the stripes to line up. But what about the unworkable wood? I've seen you work with burls and knots that look like a mess.
Knots are just where a branch used to be. The grain there is a whirlpool. It's the highest density, most stubborn part of the tree. I used to hate them. Now, I treat them like beauty marks. But you have to respect them. You can't just plow through a knot with a jointer and expect it to behave. You've got to slow down. High speed, light passes. If you try to take a heavy bite out of a knot, the wood will literally spit it back at you or chunk out a piece the size of a nickel.
Is that why my jointer sounded like it was chewing on gravel when I ran that knotty pine through it?
Exactly. The blades are hitting those vertical fibers of the knot head on. It's like hitting a brick wall. Whenever you see a change in grain direction, shift your attitude. Move from production mode into finesse mode.
Finesse mode. Got it. So, if we're summarizing this for the folks at home, or for me before I ruin another project, what's the hierarchy of grain?
First, grain is direction. Always check the slope on the side of the board before you plane or join. Second, grain is movement. Never forget that a board is wider in the summer than it is in the winter. Build for that. Third, grain is strength. If it's a chair leg or a tool handle, you want those fibers running straight through, no exits. And fourth, grain is the crown jewel. Don't hide it under heavy stains. Let those straws do the talking.
I think I'm starting to get it. It's not just the stuff the tree is made of, it's a map.
A map that changes the moment you think you've memorized it. Every tree had its own life, a windy year here, a drought there, and that's all written in the grain. Our job is just to read the book without ripping out the pages.
Well, next time I'm at the lumberyard, I'm going to be that person staring at the edges of the boards for 20 minutes.
Good. The lumberyard guys will hate you, but your chisels will thank you.
Total takeaway. Pet the cat with the fur, not against it.
Exactly. And don't be afraid to rive a little wood now and then. It's good for the soul and the forearms.